one. Okay, share screen. Mr. Trigg, sir, hello.
Good evening, Morven. How are you?
Welcome to the club, a very exclusive club for the looks of it. I'm not quite sure why, but how are you keeping, sir?
I'm fine. What about you?
Good. I'm good. Looking forward to another very good chat about all things Salvation Army and with yet another illustrious composer as yourself. So, my first, we've met briefly at Boundless, and obviously I've seen a lot of your music over the years. You were in Northern Ireland the last time that I spoke to you. I don't know whether you still are.
Yes, still live in Belfast in Northern Ireland. Yeah.
But I believe you originally come from down under.
That's true. Yeah, Melbourne,
Melbourne,
Australia.
Yeah. So what brought you to Northern Ireland and to the UK?
Well, I suppose the simple way of putting it is the love of a woman.
Fine, fair enough.
Yeah.
So
my wife Cheryl's from here originally.
So yeah, very interesting. It's one of those little niche facts not many people might be aware of. But yeah. Hey, as we said, you have various things published. So my first question is, as a composer, can you remember where it all started? Were you a child scribbler or what?
Not really. I mean, there was always music in the house. My parents were officers, and we were around the army all my life, and so there was music there, obviously, as well. But parents had a love of music and would play music in the house and that sort of thing, but didn't really try and write music until probably high school. Used to write rock pop songs with a buddy at school. He had his own home studio, which back then was something quite impressive, whereas everyone can do that with a $500 computer now. But no, he had a drum kit and real instruments and real piano and guitars and basses all in a converted garage. So we used to write songs there. That was the first time, I suppose, I did something creative with music. And then in the army, would have written, like horn charts, for contemporary songs.
Mm-hmm.
I think probably because of mainly Hillsong, Australia was a bit ahead of the curve as far as contemporary worship went. And so that would have been late 80s, early 90s, I suppose. And it was writing out parts like that. And then at the same time, probably did trombone quartets. We had a little group that played trombone quartets, and I wrote a couple of things for them. But never really, wasn't till 2001 that I started really writing. And I was working for the Salvation Army in Greater New York in the US. Mm-hmm. And thought I'll try something on a larger scale. So the first band piece I actually heard was something that I did eventually finish, but I tried it out at a Starlight Music Camp one year with the camp band.
Yeah.
And so the first time I ever heard music I'd written, it was actually called Psalm for the King, not published. First time I heard some brass music that I'd written, I had the New York staff bandmaster playing soprano, my boss Gordon Ward playing principal cornet, and Phil Smith sitting second chair, and I think Derek Smith was on the back row somewhere. So
really,
it was a bit nerve-wracking. Yeah, it was a bit nerve-wracking, to be honest, but sort of got through it okay. It was all right. Wasn't finished at that time. It was just sort of about 4 minutes of music maybe, but it's a good experience.
So you've sort of said you started out wanting to write big, because most composers, they're happy to do something functional for 4 or 5 players, and that you had some of the leading stars of the New York staff band at your disposal. So that must have been an odd feeling.
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose it wasn't really intentional, and I just started dabbling and hadn't really thought this will be played anywhere or anything like that at the time. Just it was more a bit of a, you know, sort of pipe dream fantasy type thing, to try and do something on a big scale. And yep. So
how does the you know, if it's either a commission or something that you're writing for yourself or for your local core band or musicians, is it a pen and paper job and then transfer to music notation software? Is it, you know, your mobile phone full of musical jottings? How, you know, does it differ depending on
yeah,
what it is?
I'm not a piano player. I have a piano and I know my way around a piano, but I don't play the piano. So I do sketch on the piano usually, first of all. Write out 4 parts, maybe a 5th part with other ideas that I might have, a 5th line of manuscript. Yeah, but usually start with pen and paper. And not being able to play piano, sometimes you don't get to, you know, you need to move to the computer to sort of hear it in context at the speed you want it to go, or that sort of thing. So it's helpful to me in that respect, to hear things at the speed or all the parts sort of in place. But yeah, I do a 4-part sketch first of all on piano.
Yeah, it's interesting because all the composers I've spoken to have said that one of the things that's really useful is you can have Sibelius or, you know, this brand of software and it's all perfect and in tune, but until you hear it in the flesh, it kicks in the brain and you know what's gone wrong, even though it's beautifully perfect and, you know.
Yeah.
So
well, that's the danger of the software, especially when you're new to it, when you're starting out, that it can play anything you put in there. So there's no sort of reality check on that. So absolutely, hearing an actual band of people playing something is, there's a lot more learning that can happen there. And I think, you know, after you've done it for a while, you know, you sort of know what will and won't work to a greater extent, obviously, the more experience you get.
Yeah, interesting. I was looking at your entries a little earlier on as I was preparing, and it's yeah, you've got a wide range of published music in the army, which is very interesting because you go from once in Royal David City, and your last entry that I can find is something that I only literally heard, I think, this afternoon. I've never heard it before, which was FAILT Salvation Army. I won't even dare to pronounce it. Sort of a festival arrangement for you.
Yeah, it's vulture more than
Vulture.
It's an Irish word for welcome, and the way to get around it is think of the bird, a vulture, but put a f on the start. So there you go.
Interesting.
Bit of Irish teaching for you, but I don't speak Irish at all. But just it was based on the first services in the Salvation Army in Northern Ireland, Ireland actually, and it was commissioned by John Moore at the Belfast Citadel Corps. So he had a big part, and he told me that one of the first tunes they sang was, can't think of the name now, is it Rescue the Perishing? No, that's not right. But anyway, one of the first songs they played on Irish soil is featured in that piece.
Yeah, it's a lovely piece. I was really blessed at how the tunes sort of gel together. It's, you know, you can get some of these things where it's the joins are very, and you've just had the hymn tunes plonked in, but yours are very sort of crafted together in a very melodic fashion. So it was really enjoyable to hear, being as it was brand new to me. So, but I remember shortly before we met, because we were Facebook each other outside SB&S, and I'd literally on that train been listening to Ancient of Days and Praise My Soul on the train, not really thinking, oh, I'm going to meet Roger today. And, you know, I listened to them and Battle Ready, which I do enjoy. And yet you've got right at the other end of the spectrum, My Hope and The Prayer. So, you know, you're very clearly a composer who's happy to go from the full pomp and majesty to that quiet little prayerful, almost trio in the back corner. So do you find it a natural theme to go from one to the other, or do you find yourself being sort of stereotyped into a lollipop or a meditational?
Not really. No,
Good.
I think I've been lucky in that I went to university and studied music, and was also Melbourne in the Salvation Army was very strong musically as well, and there were lots of different things to do. So I played in big bands. University also exposed me to sort of the more avant-garde, also jazz. The music department at that university had two very distinct streams, big band and jazz. There were two courses you could, classical repertoire and jazz, which you could, audition for one or the other and go to the college for that. So they were always short of trombone players because it was more of an improvisation course than a jazz course, strictly speaking. So they didn't often have their quota of trombone players for the big band. So I would have, so for 3 years, I went to big band rehearsals with all these jazz guys and stuff. And so probably things like that helped me a lot. And there was a Salvation Army big band that was run. It was a big band without saxophone, so you would know it was Salvation Army, but run by a guy called Michael Harding, and really enjoyed that experience. And they toured around Australia a couple of times, and it was a great experience as well.
Interesting. So it's been, I would guess, you're clearly saying yourself, as many other people, you were exposed to a lot of different genres that helped sort of educate your mind. And so if you felt something was applicable for that piece of music, it would naturally come in.
Also played in a couple of dodgy Latin American bands as well, on the trombone.
Dodgy Latin American. I like the saying.
Well, like La Bamba and all that sort of stuff. That's probably strictly speaking Mexican, but sort of South American music, Latin American music.
Yeah.
Played in with some not to repeated sort of outfits, but silk colored shirts and white polyester trousers and stuff. So
very sweaty.
Yeah.
So
so I was exposed to all different sorts.
Yeah. So a wide range. I mean, what I find interesting, and I don't really come across it. I mean, in the composers, they generally sort of dominate maybe one or two series, whether it's the American Festival Journal Unity series. You've done the whole thing. You've done American journals. You've done the Arthur Gallage, Judge Street Collection General Series and Unity series. So you don't seem to have an issue where you get some composers who sort of dominate the Unity series or the General series. Do you find it comfortable to be able to write cross spectrum if the occasion demands it? Oh. We've lost him. So, as I say, it's very interesting. You write cross spectrum. So, is that just because the invitation has come that way, or the impulse has given you, and that's where you've been lucky enough to have the music published?
Well, there's sort of two questions there. I think one is about the style that I write in, and the other is publication. Well, that's how I'm interpreting it anyway.
Help yourself.
So, I mean, I suppose the music comes first. I don't think about where it's going to be published first of all. And there have been instances where, I've written something and submitted it to one place, and they, it might just sit there for a while, and then other people ask me about other things, and I might say, well, I've got this thing, but it's sort of just sitting there. And if anyone approaches me, what happens more often is it might be that someone hears something I've written and said, would you consider it for this publication? Equally, sometimes when I send something to the UK, they might say, could you rescore it for one or another series, usually either from General Series to Triumph Series or vice versa. And I've done that before too. So, if the request comes in for something bright and breezy, then I'll try and write in that style. If they want something more serious or an opener, I've been asked specifically on occasion for an opener, and
Mm-hmm.
Battle Ready was an opener for Enfield, and Almighty was an opener for Camberwell Salvation Army Band in Melbourne. So yeah, sometimes they say, we want this, we want an opener, or could you do a trombone feature, or things like that. So
how do you control your, I mean, I've asked all the composers, how do you control your originality if you've got a, you know, you're sitting in the Sunday morning and you hear a piece of music, the hymn tune is played, or someone says, I want a trombone solo based on St. Clement's or Cum Ronda, bearing in mind that we know that the journals are littered with trombone solos and cornet solos and hymn. How does the Trigg mind keep the originality of the tune fresh, so you're not you're not falling into another trap kind of thing? How do you approach?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think probably others would say the same, that it's always a good idea to, well, for me anyway, I think it's a good idea to do a bit of research before you start writing. And probably what that research involves for me is, if you've been given a tune, sort of try and find out what's been done before with a tune. Like if someone gives you a commission and says, we want this tune, try and find out what's been done before. The danger is, I suppose, that you could have something deep in your mind, in your memory, that actually comes out, and maybe it isn't your own. But if it was me, I would always try and find out, well, what's been done before. I don't want to copy or be accused of copying someone else who's done. And then there might be times where you think, actually, I think there's too many treatments of that tune. It's all been done, maybe you think, or else maybe it hasn't all been done, but you don't want to do something that's too far from what the tune can take, or what's appropriate for a particular tune. It's not every tune that sounds great when you give it a swing treatment or a rock treatment.
So I've been told.
But that's personal taste as well, comes into it, obviously.
So your own kind of musical education, I mean, it would be natural to help you when you're writing these things, because you can then reflect on it and go, how do I, I may need to approach it from a different angle. I mean, one of your first three pieces are all Christmas based. I mean, sometimes Christmas can be the easiest thing to write for, and sometimes it's a case of, do we really need another arrangement of this carol? There's 101, do you relish the temptation of doing Christmas pieces, or is it just what's you felt is needed at the time?
No, it's well, there's one there called Christmas Prelude, which has got a bit of a story behind it.
We love stories.
Yeah, so
well, I do. I don't speak for anyone else, but carry on.
There used to be a television show that ran every Christmas in Northern Ireland called, can't actually remember the name of it, Sounds of Christmas or something like that, BBC, local Northern Ireland BBC, sing carols, that's what it was. And I was invited to be part of a quintet. Jonathan Corey sort of asked me to help him out, and there was a brass quintet which accompanied a number of the carols. And he thought it would be a good idea to have an opener. So the TV, because it was a TV program, they just wanted something short and sharp, so that's actually where that came from. That was originally for a brass quintet. And then someone heard it in New York and said, would you rescore it for the ABJ, the American Band Journal? And so that's where that sort of came from. It was actually a TV, the start of a TV show. 1 year. I can't remember when.
I mean, at the moment, you start off with Once More David City and go down to Velvet Salvation Army. I mean, it's right across the spectrum. So, I mean, I think the one I sort of first associated with you was All the Nations, which is a very interesting set. I mean, it's labelled as a festival arrangement, but it's a very interesting piece of music. I mean, 2017 it got published. But could you kind of share me the story behind All the Nations? It's a very lovely piece, I think.
Thank you very much.
You
would have heard that if you went to one of the sessions at Boundless 2015, where I met you.
Yes.
The Melbourne Staff Band played it when they were the duty band for the large corporate service.
Mm-hmm.
There were so many different concerts and meetings, but they did the big one, the big hall, the day they used it in that day that they were the duty band. Anyway, so Ken Waterworth, who's been a great supporter over the years and asked for music all the time and played it, fortunately too, had asked me to write something for the tour and for the Congress that reflected. I think it was to reflect, aspects of the Boundless Congress. So I tried to just think of a theme that, all the nations, and it's a bit of scripture from from the Psalms, where, and then try and fit songs around that idea of all the nations coming together and meeting as one to praise God. So that was sort of thinking behind that.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the middle one, which was more of a sing-along type effect on the day, which was good. And I was surprised at how many nations seemed to know that song was Come Now Is the Time to Worship, a contemporary song.
Yeah.
In the middle. So that sort of got them singing a bit and stuff. So that was good. But yeah, it's sort of a bit of a fast, slow, fast form, and not too long. They had a pretty strict time limit on what.
I've heard many composers were told they had a very strict time limit on what they could write, and I think it was Ray Simonelli said he was quoting the late great Emil Soderstrom, who lived in the year of writing live radio music. So you had that case of, if it was 4.5 minutes long and they wanted 5, you literally had to do it there and then. You couldn't just go away and think about it. You had to be able to manually manipulate the music and not spoil the essence. So
yeah,
it's very interesting to hear you say that. Who are your musical mentors in your journey when you started writing to the point where it was being published and people were going, hey, can we publish that in the USA, in Australia? Who are the people that encouraged you and sort of keep you writing?
Yeah, well, I suppose Ken was a big one, Ken Waterworth. He, that piece I talked about that we played at half finished at Starlight Camp, the Melbourne Staff Band actually premiered that at commissioning a couple of years later, or a year and a half later. So that was a big thrill hearing that piece live with an audience. So Ken's been a great encourager and asked for music. Jonathan Corey, when he was at Enfield, would have asked for music quite a lot. And since then, there's been more people ask for music, which is great. And probably the people that have helped me, again, that Star Lake situation, Harold Bergmeyer actually took me aside and kindly gave me an hour of his time and looked at the score and helped me and gave me a few tips and stuff, which was great. He's a very astute man, and it was a great help and a great encourager. Since then, actually Colin Woods, who used to be, he's the retired Melbourne staff bandmaster, and I was in the staff band for a few years before I moved to the US. And since in more recent years, I suppose the last 15 years or so, I would send him scores. And he's not a composer himself, but he's such a brilliant band trainer and a great musician, and he's been a great help looking at scores. I have spent half an hour, I think, with Kenneth Downing.
Oh my God, you as well, eh?
Well, he was visiting Belfast. He was visiting Belfast one time, and I think he had told me that he was coming, and so I sent him a couple of scores ahead of time, and he sat with me for about, I think, 25 minutes between meetings, which was very generous of him because those days and weekends are always very busy.
Yeah.
So, Robert Redhead was a good encourager too. I was in touch with him a couple of times, and I've met him a few times too. I'm sure I'll leave someone out.
I think we've got a mutual friend, because when you were in Belfast, well, I say when you were still in Belfast, at one time, I believe Martin Cordner was in the Belfast locality.
He was my corps officer for a few years.
Yeah.
So I know Martin.
Yeah. I've
Yeah,
got to know Martin fairly well over the last few years, and a very talented individual.
absolutely. Yes. No, he's written some great music. So,
So, what did are there any kind of signposts in your memory of real big lessons that you've learned from your music writing experience? I mean, you've got, you know, a dozen or so published things, but obviously you've got stuff that's unpublished, stuff that has just been written along the way, and for whatever reason, not just for the Salvation Army Brass Band, but for the different musical ensembles that have asked you for it and that you've been able to accept. What do you feel that there are any sort of big moments when you think you really clicked on a moment and said, I remember that that was a changing point in your compositional life?
right. So, watershed moment, is that what you're talking
Yeah,
about?
I mean, if
Yeah.
there's a, you know, something
Yeah.
that sort of
I mean,
really big,
I
apart
think
from
the
sitting down with
lessons,
Ken Downey.
the lessons, you know, no one's, I don't think anyone ever masters composition or music for that matter. But you hope that you improve, you know, piece after piece and time after time, and that you learn from mistakes. Really, probably is what, or you know, I'm sure I can't think of any at the moment, but there's you know a specific example. But there are things where you thought, that wasn't great, or it was okay, but not really. I think sometimes a composer is their own harshest critic, and
Yeah.
it's and you need that critical voice to write anything, or else you would just write total rubbish. But yeah, I suppose one big moment for me was the ISB 120. The Melbourne Staff Band played in the Albert Hall when each band got half
Yeah.
an hour. I don't know if
Yeah.
everyone knows all about it, but each band got half an hour on the Saturday afternoon, and they played a piece that I'd written for their tour. They had a tour preceding the ISB weekend called Atonement.
Yeah, lovely piece.
And I mean, I wrote it for the tour, and I suppose I knew they were playing at the Albert Hall. But the truth is, I only found out on Thursday night that they were playing it at the Albert Hall.
Okay, yeah.
I'd already booked my tickets and everything. I mean, I would have gone anyway, obviously. And having been in a couple of staff bands, I was looking forward to seeing guys that I knew and had been in bands with. But that was a very exciting moment. Obviously, the first time I had anything played in the Albert Hall, and nerve-wracking as well. Like it was just a combination of fear and excitement, you know. But it seemed to go over okay, so it was sort of a sigh of relief, I suppose. But that was an exciting moment, and maybe that's the point where you think, well, I must be doing something right, you know.
Yeah,
you missed it, did you?
I miss it. I remember that I had to come out. My family was in the park opposite, and my phone was bleeping all. I don't know who was preceding the Melbourne Staff Band. I think the Japan Staff Band, if I remember, because it was
right,
alphabetically. And of course, I think everyone had their socks knocked off with the Japan Staff Band with the standing ovation music. And my phone just blipped, please come outside. We need to. Okay. And I came out and completely missed the Melbourne Staff Band thing. And when I watched the video later, I think, you know, with Rebecca Raymond and the wonderful singing and everything.
Yeah. They put on a good show. They definitely did.
They did. It was ironic because a few years later they came, I don't know whether it was with the same tour, it must have been a few years later, possibly for the Boundless Congress. They came to Peterborough, and I said to my father, I missed them the last time around. I'm going to go and see them at Peterborough. And it was wonderful. And I knew that Sam Creamer had written some music, and I'd only just become aware of his music. And I went not knowing whether they were going to play it all. And it was a wonderful concert. I mean, they've got some really wonderful players in that band. And
yes, they do.
The strengths that they play to the music, don't they? So it's God-honouring music, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
No, they do a great job, yeah.
The only problem was we had a 2.5 hour link because we came home via the Cambridge turnoff, and everything to East Anglia was shut off. So it took, instead of an hour and a half, it took us 2.5 hours. My father was not pleased. We had the Chicago Staff Band the next day in Felixstowe, and by the time we got to bed, we were elated, but you know, it was memorable and then unfortunately tailed off. But some real class players in that. So when was you've obviously been writing for many years and you find great pleasure in doing this. When was the last time you heard a piece of music other than yours that moved you, and why? What was it and why?
That's a very difficult question.
Oh dear.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to think. There's so much good music that you hear. I don't know if I've got a good answer for that, Morgan.
It's not necessary. It's just a routine question I put out there because you never know. Something may have been on your brain all day, and you go, "Do you know what? I've not been able to get that out of my brain." And some people, no, they just enjoy everything that comes to them. So yeah. Do you have any? I mean, outside of compositional skilling and mentoring, what sort of army music people writing do you enjoy playing yourself as a musician? Are there any people that when it comes on the stand, you're going, do you know what? I'm going to enjoy this. This is going to be a challenge. This has got superb. This guy has never written a bad piece.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people that fall into that category for me, probably. I think probably when I was very young and, well, 18, 19, you know, I might have been in a band, but not really, you know, that excited about going to band practice or something. There were a few guys who were writing music.
I remember that.
I think I probably enjoy it more now, having done it for a lot of years than when I was 18. But, you know, you'd sooner be out doing sport or watching TV or something. But things change anyway. But probably in those years, I think the music of, I suppose, you know, when you're young, you think of a brass band being a bit old fashioned and that sort of thing. And I think that was certainly my experience. But I was at the Box Hill band and they had a good band. And I suppose that gave them the luxury of being able to play a lot more, a wider range of music than maybe some other bands. And hearing music from the likes of Kerno and Himes and Buller and even Barry Gott, you know, I would sort of put those guys sort of in that category of, for me, they made brass band music quite attractive at that time.
Yeah.
And because it was, you know, reflecting the modern culture maybe a bit more and made a bit more sense to me as an 18-year-old with all the sort of rock and jazz and, you know, popular styles that were in there. So they probably, you know, their music probably helped me stay engaged in brass bands and probably in the Salvation Army too, to some extent. So I suppose that those were the guys who inspired me first of all and thought, wow, that's pretty cool music. But obviously since that time, there's so many great composers in the army that I would draw inspiration from. And I suppose there's all the same old ones that probably everyone would mention: Eric Ball and Les Condon and Ray Stedman Allen would be obvious mentions. But there's so many guys that have written beautiful music. You know, even Brian Bowen, like My Comfort and Strength is a superb piece. I love that piece. And probably when I was 18 or 19, went to music camps, and probably why I say Ray Stedman Allen and Les Condon is, I think 2 years in a row, we had a very good young band and we played The Holy War, and 1 year, and the next year we played The Present Age, both very powerful,
very big
pieces of music. So that was sort of quite formative, I suppose, as well.
Interesting. And out of your published works, I mean, as a composer, I would be surprised if you didn't get an email and a comment: we played this on Sunday, thank you very much, we played this piece. Are there any pieces of music that sort of pop up every now and again and sort of say, you know, we played Battle Ready, or we played My Hope, we played, you know, Atonement the other day, and we just, you know, what's the most unusual places that you feel that you've had an email or a comment come from saying, you know, we played this on Sunday, or we played this in the festival?
Okay, well, I'll split that into two again.
Go ahead. I don't mind it slightly.
Well, first of all, probably the piece that I would get the most contact with over would be something that's not that old. It's All to Jesus. It's in the General series, and it's basically a treatment of I Surrender All.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably the one that a lot of people would get in touch and sort of say, we played this, oh, I really like that, or that sort of comment. Probably the most unusual thing is I have completed a commission for a band in Seoul, South Korea.
Yep.
So I didn't see that coming, but yeah, so that was quite good. And obviously they picked the tunes, so it doesn't maybe have a super wide appeal because there's some South Korean contemporary song in the middle of it, so it sort of limits itself that way, but that's okay because they played it and they were really appreciative and everything. And so
you hit on a very interesting point, because you get a lot of, I mean, you yourself will allude to when you're doing tunes and choruses that are very familiar to the congregation and the people that you're writing for, and particularly if they've asked you. But I remember being in the congregation, actually the video's on YouTube because my nephew was talking about it this afternoon, of Zimbabwe, that Norman Beercroft was actually given the tunes, and three of them he'd never heard before. And he said, I've no idea whether it's the right speed or the wrong speed. As a composer, you get this thing of being from an international point of view. So you get tunes presented to you. Do you often get results say, okay, here's the tune and here's the melody on a piece of paper, and you kind of include it without any knowledge of whether it's supposed to be fast or slow, or does that really depend on whether you've been asked to write a sort of meditative solo or hymn tune arrangement, or what? How does that work out with an alien tune to you as a composer arranger?
Yeah, well, a better example of that was a commission I got from Australia. They wanted a march, and they had a song. This was a choir called South Barwon, which used to be Geelong West, which actually my parents went to training college out of, so there's a bit of a connection there. Mm-hmm. But they had asked for a tune to be included that I'd never heard before, and they didn't really have. Someone wrote out the melody on a piece of paper, and then the band, at one of the band practices, the band sang it and sent it over the internet to me. So it was essentially a tune with no harmony, and I sort of just had a stab at what I thought the harmony should be. Didn't try to do anything too clever, but yeah, so that sort of like you get a melody line, put it in a march, and write the rest basically and see if that works.
Yeah.
But they were happy enough, so it seemed to make sense to them musically. So
I think like any band that gets something written for them, if you can ask a composer to do something and they turn around and they produce something, I think it's a blessing. Oh, thanks so much, you've been able to do something. It's a wonderful thing. That's it. Looking at your thing, I don't see any marches on there. So is that just sort of because you're happy doing the hymn tune arrangements and the Christmas music, or is it just they're not published yet?
I find it a bit daunting, to be honest with you.
Really?
I think to write a good march is very difficult, and I suppose the other thing too is that we don't march like we used to march physically, so certainly not in the frequency that we would have once. So I suppose there are less marches being written, but it's a difficult medium. It's probably not my number one option for me musically.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that might be a challenge for me.
I'm going to ask what is. If marches aren't your number one idiom for writing, do you have a favourite genre for writing in army music, or not?
No, I like writing in all styles, but probably, the things that are most natural to me, I suppose, is maybe writing in a popular style, modern contemporary. But I do love, the old tunes. Not every contemporary song has a good tune.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's fair to say. Not every old-fashioned song has a good tune either.
Yeah.
But you know, I suppose that's the composer's role as well, to sort of you know, choose the things that will take a treatment well, or that you've got something to work with that you know, enthuses you about it. Because if you're not enthusiastic about something, it makes the job a lot more difficult. So having a choice of what you can choose as material that you want to arrange is a big plus.
Have you ever surprised yourself? Because I know some composers, they get asked to do a hymn tune arrangement. They're like, I don't really want it, but you take a fresh look at it and it goes into the brain and gets stuck there. Have you ever had that?
I haven't actually been asked that many times to do a hymn tune arrangement, and All to Jesus is probably one of the, well, it was someone who asked for a hymn tune arrangement. So, I mean, pieces that I've written have got hymn tune arrangements in them, but sometimes it's not just a straight hymn tune arrangement. So, yeah, I do like writing hymn tune arrangements. I don't have a problem. I enjoy that as much as anything else.
So as of let's ask a nice easy question. As of dinner time today, what was your favourite Salvation Army song?
Right, now I did have a think about this, because that's a really difficult question. The easy answer for me is to make it a bit broader than that. And one of my favourite hymns that's in the Salvation Army songbook, which I don't think is a Salvation Army song, is
in the songbook. It's fine by me.
Yeah, Dear Lord and Father of Mankind.
Ah, yeah.
To the tune Repton. I think that's a very good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was. It reminds me, because I was speaking to a vicar friend of mine a while ago, and the one thing that he gets a lot to ask for is Repton for funerals. He says he tried to do it for weddings. He said, but he said they may not necessarily know the words, but it's kind of, they know that tune. It's one of those instantly recognisable tunes, isn't it, Repton? I think the Lord and Father of Mankind, it's got a very calming influence to it. It makes you think about the words. So,
yeah, it's a super tune. I love it.
So are we going to have a arrangement of Repton anytime soon? Is there anything in the archives that you could...
No, I've never attempted it. I think sometimes you think it's maybe so good you don't want to mess around, but no, yeah, that may happen someday. I'm sort of fulfilling, when people ask me to write, I think some other people might be the same, but you know, I'm not writing all the time. I'm not one of those guys. I'm working full time and have 2 young children, and you know, a busy enough life, and so I'm not writing all the time. And I'm not, some guys say, you know, this music has to get out. That's not really kind of me. So if people ask me, I'll write, and that's probably keeps me busy enough, just using that approach.
You like the deadline approach. It's the encouragement that it's going to get used, and people have been good enough to ask you for something.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. If you know, if someone asks, that means they want to use it. So that's obviously as good an incentive as any, that, you know, whereas you might write something and no one will touch it.
Yeah, fine. Favorite Bible quote? Do you have one?
For me, it changes quite a bit more but I think one that's been pretty consistent in my life for me as a favorite would be Romans 8. There's a passage, I think maybe verse 38. For I am convinced that neither life nor death, angels or demons, and it goes on, will separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus. So I think for me that's a very reassuring passage of scripture that gives me a lot of confidence that, you know, that God really cares about each of us and cares about me.
Absolutely. So, and with this enforced lockdown, you've mentioned your family are incredibly important, and the time balance is a very distinguished one. So have you had has the time presented itself to accepting the commissions in the pipeline? What's in the immediate future from the Trigg composition bench? Is there anything we can keep a lookout for?
Yeah, a couple of commissions that I'm finishing off at the moment, and nothing ahead of those that I haven't. So I've started things that I haven't finished basically, but there's nothing ahead of beyond that at the moment. So yeah, fulfilling commissions, and that's about it at the moment. Yeah, but yeah, I suppose when they said you don't have to come to work anymore, I might have hoped that you would, I had more time, but it hasn't sort of worked out like that when you're working from home.
Yeah.
And homeschooling, teaching children, and stopping them from, driving each other crazy. So.
I don't very often ask this one, but I think you might like it. So if it was a normal weekend with the family with no barriers, what would you be doing? What are the other passions in your life apart from having to sit down and do the compositions, which you so clearly enjoyed? So what else do you enjoy doing with your time and your family?
Yeah, well, I like getting outside, exercising. I really enjoy sport. I've played sport sort of since I could till now. So I enjoy basketball, still play basketball, golf, and enjoy watching Aussie rules, of course, and cricket, and winning keeping the Ashes when we play England and stuff. So that's always good.
Tell who my ancestors are then.
Yeah, so sport, I suppose, outside of music, I really enjoy sport. And what else? Yeah, that's probably away from. I like reading too. Don't get reading as much as I should, but I do like reading.
I'd love to read more if I had the time, but
yeah,
I used to adore reading. I still read what I can, but yeah.
Usually on holiday, I'll read a couple of books, but I
yes.
think the summer holiday might be off this year.
Yeah. So
there's a virus going around apparently.
Yeah, I had heard anything. I'm just not going out to find out. This is why I'm interviewing all these composers. Yeah. So I mean, you say you've had people write to you about All to Jesus and some of your music, but is there any particular piece of your public music you're particularly proud of, and it really hit the mark for what you wanted it to achieve? Is that answerable?
That's really difficult for a composer, I think, to answer. It's a good question, but it's difficult to answer. I think, with any kind of art, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, or the eye of the ear of the hearer, if you like. So, when you get those little messages that come through, I think that's probably the number one, that if something that you wrote had an actual impact on someone and was meaningful for them, or showed them something about their faith or something new for them. I think that's the ultimate, sort of compliment of music. If it moves people or encourages them, and yeah, that's probably.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. Well, I'll pray with you in a second, and as always, for those who wish to join in, open eye, closed eyes, I leave it entirely up to you. But I know, Roger, that Mr. Trigg, I show you beforehand because you've seen this, but I must show this to all the waiting crowd. But this is the new T-shirt. So I love chatting to Salvationist composers, specially made for this video selection. So, Roger, you have the premiere performance of the new T-shirt, which finally
What a privilege is mine. What a privilege mine.
Way round. They got it all wrong, and I had to send it back and say, no, this has got to be filmed with some of the best and most illustrious composers the Salvation Army can call on. So it's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege to chat with you.
And where can I get one? I mean, all the viewers, all the listeners, they'll be wanting to know where to get them.
There's a T-shirt place online. They've done it really quickly because it's just a basic text on a white T-shirt. But I'd love emblems and sort of logos, but I think it would cost 3 times as much money. So it only cost me about 3 or 4 quid. And for a cheap T-shirt for some illustrious people, so I don't.
Budget is key. Budget is key.
Yeah, this is all done free of charge, and no one's making any money out of any of this, and neither will they or should they. You are giving up your time freely, and I'm really appreciative. And thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, and thank you for asking, Morven.
It was a pleasure. You responded. The people who have responded, and the people who are still contemplating. I hope this is encouragement, and that it's a really relaxed, informal, and the questions aren't designed to make your PhD go the way that, I don't know, to you put through the shredder. You're being helpful, and it's not cause you to get that migraine. But I'll close you with prayer, Roger, and then we'll finish the chat that way. But dear Lord, as always, a pleasure and a privilege to speak to yet another member of your flock, Lord, that you have endowed with the gifts of composition and arranging, and that musical ability that's just so wonderfully used in your church, Lord. And we thank you for Roger and his family and his friends, that he has so faithfully been able to follow you around the world musically with his family. We thank you that he clearly can hear you, and that he strives to make sure that your voice is heard when the writing is on the wall and the board and the Mac and the piece of paper, and that when he is striving to produce whatever it is needed, whether it be a commission or whether it's something that's just struck him, that it's to be the best it can be, and to give the glory to you, Lord. And we thank you that his work does that. We thank you for the people that have been blessed by the Almighty Spirit that is working through Roger. We thank you for his family, who they're understanding when he has to lock himself away and when he's whistling that tune for the 100th time. We thank you that the understanding of his core folk and the love. And we thank you for his mentors and friends and advisors and his cooperators who help to encourage him and to aspire him. And when he gets under that black cloud, Lord, that we all do, that he knows you are there with him, and that the ultimate light of the world, as we resurrect that wonderful Dean Goffin piece, is still there and central in his heart, Lord, guiding him. So I just pray for Roger, his compositional skills, that he will continue to grow, mature, evolve, and just take great delight in being able to serve you in whatever way you ask him to do it. And that he clearly hears your voice, and that he makes sure he can understand that, and that that peace of God is central in that. But I leave him in your hands, Lord, and ask that you will bless him continually at this time of lockdown and uncertainty, Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Morven.